Hello Year 8, welcome to the next lesson in our learning about the causes of World War One. I thought this picture was a good place to start, so have a look at it closely. We've got men here of the 2nd Australian Division having a well-earned lunch break in a trench near Amiens in northern France. Well, hot food actually wasn't supplied to the frontline trenches until 1915. Before then, it was only cold food, and that usually was corned beef out of a tin, which often became known as bully beef. So not the nicest of experiences. Now, you might be thinking, Australians in World War One? Well, absolutely. And they were there because Australia was part of the British Empire. So many Australians fought alongside us because of this, as well as New Zealanders, people from India, South Africa, Canada, and that's because they were all part of the British Empire. So they were called to fight when we went to war. Which brings us to our focus today, which is how far was imperialism to blame for causing World War One? Now, just for a bit of a recap about what that word imperialism means, well, imperialism aims to create an empire, and imperialist countries want to take control of other countries to build an empire that they can run. Now, they may use military force to do this. So, Britain is a key example at this time of an imperialist country, but it's not the only one. Okay, before we start, we're going to follow the same approach that we've done before. So at the top of a new page, could you write the word imperialism and draw some mini pictures to describe the word? And again, you can see my example here. Now, there are a couple of definitions here that you might want to note down. And by all means, go back to the beginning of the video if you want to write the other keywords down as well. So here we've got empire is a number of individual nations that are all controlled by the government or ruler of one particular country. So the example there of the British Empire is the one powerful country which then controls and runs Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and they are part of the British Empire. Now, to colonise is when one country takes control of another country. I know the video of me has cut off that a little bit. So colonise is when one country takes control of another country. Could you please write this down into your book and prepare your page for the notes so you're ready to start? Key question I think it's important to discuss at this point is, why should we care about the causes of World War One? And that might be a question that you're asking. And I just want to, at the start of the next few lessons, really show you the human impact of this war, which I talked about in the very first lesson. That this war is going to influence and change so many lives, and it's going to destroy so many lives as well. But it's only through looking at the individual stories do we get a sense of what that really means. So this is a picture that I particularly love. So this is the Indian Expeditionary Force, as you can see in the sort of war-torn landscape here of northern France. And this is March 1917, so 3 years into the war. And again, you might not have been aware, but 1.3 million Indian soldiers fought alongside us in World War One because India was part of the British Empire, and just over 74,000 of them lost their lives. So that is just under the capacity of Old Trafford. So Manchester United Stadium full. Imagine all of those people die in the war. So there's a huge impact, and these people also are dying many miles away from their home in a place that would have seemed extremely unfamiliar to them. And just to highlight a personal story, just as an example, so this is Henry Nicholas, who's a New Zealander. He was a carpenter, and he joined up in New Zealand for the war in 1916. So again, New Zealand was part of the British Empire, hence why he was called up. You might notice the different shape of the hat he's wearing, which again indicates that he is not of the British troop, but he's a New Zealander. Now, he was awarded the Victoria Cross in 1917, which is the highest honour that you can be awarded. and this was because he single-handedly attacked an enemy position that was, you know, really difficult to attack, many people there, and he took on single-handedly, overcoming 16 people, capturing 4 of them and a machine gun, and did it virtually single-handedly. So an amazing sort of piece of bravery, and saying he actually saved countless lives. He sort of charged towards this position alone and took it on, which is incredible. And he received that Victoria Cross from the King, King George V, at Buckingham Palace, only to die 3 weeks before the end of the war in 1918. So he never got back to New Zealand. So and that's just one example of an extraordinary life and huge potential. He was only 25 when he joined up. His whole life ahead of him, cut short, is finished because of this war. So there are millions of such stories that give us all reason to care and to understand why these people ended up fighting from 1914 to 1918. Right, just to get prepared for some notes that you're going to take, could you, underneath the title of Imperialism, just sketch this into your book, please? So put a line dividing down the middle, maybe only for half a page or so, and then draw the 2 people. Again, that can be an outline or a stick figure, it doesn't matter. And then just put Britain, what is the size of their empire, and Germany, what is the size of their empire. They are imperial rivals, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So this is why I want you to set it up like this, so it's almost like they're competing and they're rivals side by side, and we're going to have a look and we're going to compare them. So if you could sketch that into your book first of all, and then we'll move on, and you will be filling this area with some notes. Okay, so pause the video now to get this into your book so you're ready to start. So let's start to look at the imperial power of Britain. So Britain at the beginning of the 20th century was the greatest power in the world. So we were in a very strong and powerful position. We were rich, and we had a powerful industrialized, we were an industrialized country. So that means we had lots of factories, so we could make goods, we could make weapons, and we could produce a lot of things in Britain. So we literally had industry of making things. But we also had the, and you can see that here in the picture is just an example of our cities. We're having lots of factories, we're growing, we're developing. But we also had the largest overseas empire, which covered a quarter of the globe by 1914. So here on the map, you can just see the huge area that the British Empire covered, and you can see some of the key countries there, Australia, New Zealand, India, areas of Africa, Canada, all are going to play a big role in World War I because they are part of our British Empire. Now, we felt very protective of our empire and of being the most powerful country in the world. We didn't want anybody to threaten that position. Which brings us to Germany. So Germany's leader, Kaiser Wilhelm II, here he is, just wanted Germany to be the most important country in the world. So he looked at Britain and thought, we want Germany to be, you know, as in as good a position as Britain is. He wanted an empire that was as big and as strong as Britain's. And he said his ambitions for empire, he always described it as seeking a place in the sun. He wanted an empire around the world in those places that are tropical and sunny. So the Kaiser Wilhelm is ambitious. He wants Germany to have an empire. He wants his place in the sun. And soon Germany began to really compete with Britain for the title of being the most powerful country. They had a larger population than us. Many of the industries, Germany also had really developed good industries that were better in many ways, more advanced than ours. She had more natural resources in Germany itself there. Obviously, we relied on the empire to get resources, but if we just looked at Britain alone, we didn't have many natural resources. And Germany was expanding trade throughout the world. So by 1913, she is selling more to Europe than we are. So Germany is really progressing. So if we look at this image here, now you might look at their empire and think, oh, well, that's, you know, it's nowhere near as big as Britain's. But the Kaiser Wilhelm wanted to change that. And he was looking at the empire he had, and he wanted to try and develop it. So Germany is really a growing threat. It also wants an empire and to be an imperial power. And Britain starts to feel very threatened by a Germany that's becoming increasingly ambitious and powerful. Okay, so now it's over to you. For each side, so for Britain and Germany, I'd like you to just write down some bullet points about their empire, but also about how powerful they are at this time. 3 to 4 bullet points would be fantastic. And then could you answer this question? Why was Britain worried about Germany? And then use that sentence and then complete that sentence and try to write as much as you can. Britain began to be worried about Germany because, and if you can get that word empire or imperial in there, that would be fantastic. So pause the video and please complete your notes now. So let's now look at France, another key European country. So France had been one of the most important countries in Europe, and that was until 1870 to 71. And something there happened called the Franco-Prussian War, but really you could understand this as when France went to war with Germany and lost in 1870 to 71. Now, because they lost, they had to hand over a piece of land called Alsace-Lorraine. And if you look at the map here, you can see it's pointed out. Now, that area is right on the border between France and Germany, and that chunk of land, that piece of land, has to go to Germany, and they take that after they win the war. So you can imagine that France feels very, very angry and bitter about this, and also very vulnerable because they now can't protect the border area because Germany has taken that borderland area. So they feel very vulnerable and worried about a powerful German neighbour that essentially is controlling the border area of their country. France was also not as industrialised as Germany or Britain, so it didn't feel it could compete. And again, that made it feel quite vulnerable. But it did have a very significant empire, which you can see here on the map. Huge areas of Central and West Africa under its control, including Morocco, Tunisia. It controls Madagascar, even Vietnam. So it's got a sizable empire and a large army. And this is important that they felt very bitter about losing to Germany in 1870 to 71. So they have quite strong feelings of wanting revenge. So relations between France and Britain are not good. And part of that is because, you know, France feels its position as an imperial power with a great empire is really declining and is being threatened by Germany. So could you now complete these questions? I would just put France as a small subheading for your notes and then complete these 3 questions. Please use the sentence starters in red to help you. So pause the video and complete your notes on France. Okay, for the remaining 2 countries or 2 empires of Russia and Austro-Hungary, I'm going to give you some information on them and then you will complete a fill in the gaps. So make sure you're listening closely and by all means take some notes in the back of your book if you wish. So Russia. At this time, Russia was the largest country in the world. It covers 1/6 of the globe on its own, and it has a huge population of 159 million. But it's backward. So it's a large country, but it's relatively weak. It doesn't have the industry and the power that Britain and Germany have. Over 85% of its population are peasants, like the ones that you see in this picture, very sort of poorer people who are living in the countryside. But Russia wanted to increase her influence in the Balkans. So it's really looking to extend its power and influence in this area here, which I'm showing you on the map. So the Balkans is this area here. Now, the people in the Balkans were very similar in language and culture to Russian, and they were known as Slavs. And so Russia had very many similarities with the people who lived in this area, and they are really looking to extend their influence in this area. So they're very, very interested and very sensitive about the Balkan area. Finally, Austro-Hungary. So Austro-Hungary was a large empire in the centre of Europe, which you can see on the map here. It consisted of many different groups of people who have their own language, customs and way of life. So, you know, if you look at the countries in the map today, it now covers areas which today we know as Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, Slovenia, Croatia. So now we know them as being independent, and they have very individual ways of living. Well, that was the same then, but they were under the power of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So many different people who have very particular languages and way of life. So they're difficult to rule. They're not all the same. They're not all one people. They've got differences. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a place that wasn't easy to rule and manage. But now here comes the thing I want you to focus on and think, oh, this could be a problem. So Austro-Hungary is also really interested in this Balkans area as well. Now you should be thinking, who else has been interested in this area? So you can see the Balkan area is right on the border of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So they're very interested in this area as a possible place that they could expand their power into. And you might think about where the potential problems and dangers might be coming from. In your books, could you now complete this fill in the gaps activity? So pause the video and please complete this task. Please change to a different coloured pen, and you can use this side just to check your work and make sure you've got all of your notes correct. So pause the video and just check your answers, please. That is the end of this lesson on the role of imperialism in causing World War I. Thank you for all your hard work so far, and now it's the end of the lesson. It's time for some R&R, which is a proper army term for rest and recuperation. And here you can see in the picture some soldiers in northern France in the Somme doing just that, having some time off to have a game of football. So next lesson we will be learning about the role of nationalism in causing World War I. So thank you very much for all your work.